Hi everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel Rather Be Reading, and today I'm bringing to you a recent reads video. It has been a week since I last checked in for a recent reads video. I managed to complete a total of 5 books over this past week, which I'm pretty happy with. And I'm trying to think if there's anything fun or exciting to report that's happened over the last week. Not really. My niece and nephew just arrived today. They moved to Queensland earlier this year, but they've just arrived today to spend 3 weeks of the school holiday staying with my parents. So that's really nice. I'll get to see them a little bit over the next 3 weeks, which is lovely. I go back to work on Monday, which is very depressing, but you know, gotta earn that living. So yeah, that's really nothing to report. So let's jump into the books that I read over this past week. But before we even jump into the books, I last week mentioned that I had just completed a notebook, completely filled a notebook, where I just write down my reading notes. And so I thought I'd show you guys the new one that I'm now using, and it's this Lion King one that says, "Let's be weird together." Weird Timon, Pumbaa, and Adult Simba, which I just thought was really cute. So anyway, let's jump into the 5 books that I read. So the very first book that I read over this past week was my reread of The Book Thief. For those of you who don't know, this is young adult, but I think it's very, crosses borders. I know a lot of adults who have read this and equally as enjoyed it. I mean, not that adults can't read YA, but I think even for adults who don't read YA, I think would enjoy this. But it's YA, technically historical fiction. You're following the main character of Liesel, who at the start of the story basically ends up being adopted by a German couple, and they live in Germany during World War II, and basically she steals books throughout her life under different circumstances, and words and books have a really powerful influence on her life, basically. And the interesting kind of aspect to this is that this is narrated, so Liesel is the main character, but it is narrated by Death. And so you see the story from the perspective of Death, which is really, really interesting. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I hadn't read it since I did my initial read of it 4 or 5 years ago. I loved this just as much as I did the first time. I sobbed, even though I knew what was going to happen. I mean, I knew what was going to happen the first time as well, because the fun thing about this is Death spoils the story for you as he goes. He tells you at different points what's going to happen, and yet you're still so emotionally gut-wrenched by things when they do happen. Which I guess is just a testament to the writing. I think Markus Zusak's writing is beautiful. I love the characters. I love this story. I just love everything about this book. I really, really do love this, and I gave it 5 stars once again on a reread. So there's that. I then read Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. This is one of my Kindle backlist books, or a book that I've had on my Kindle for ages. It's a thriller novel, and it's basically, you're told the very generalized synopsis is you're basically told 3 things up front: that this woman is in a coma, her husband, she doesn't trust her husband, and sometimes she lies. They're basically the 3 things you kind of told. So the kind of gist of this story, very vaguely, is that we're following the story of a woman who's in a coma, and she is aware while she's in this coma, but she doesn't remember how she ended up in this coma or what happened. And so you're kind of getting her perspective while she's in the coma, trying to figure out what's going on. And then also past a couple of different time periods in the past, kind of leading up to her being in the coma, and then a time in the past, all kind of leading up to these events that led to her being in the coma, is the general gist of the plot. I think that the author did a really good job of leaving the reader kind of feeling very off balance and confused. There's a lot of different just different threads and things going on that you're never really quite sure exactly kind of what's happening, which is always fun for me. I didn't connect to this quite as much as I wanted to, despite the fact that it is, I think, a really good thriller. I will say huge trigger warnings in this. There's trigger warnings for OCD and kind of anxiety, but huge trigger warnings for rape and sexual assault. There is a very graphic rape scene in this, so just know that going into this. In the end, I gave it 3.75 stars. Like I said, I just didn't connect to the thriller as much as I wanted to, but I do recognize that I think this is a genuinely good thriller, and I did still really enjoy it, and I would recommend it. I gave it 3.75 stars. And then my next book that I read was my final read for 2020, and that was My Sister is Missing by Julia Barrett. This is one of my NetGalley arcs, so is a book that I received a digital copy of in exchange for an honest review. I was really excited because this was my last read of the year and was my last outstanding NetGalley arc that I had outstanding, of like the books that I've had for forever that I hadn't gotten around to reviewing. This is the last one, so it was nice to kind of get that off my plate before the end of 2019. Have I been saying 2020? It was my last read for 2019 before we went into 2020. Anyway, so this is another thriller. This one is basically about a woman. We're following a woman whose sister has recently given birth to a baby. And we kind of know up front that the sister was having an affair, and that she's not sure that the baby is her husband's, and that the man she was having an affair with has like threatened to like expose her to the husband, and that's caused some stressful situations. And then basically the sister goes missing with the baby. The sister and the baby both kind of go missing, and we're kind of following that story. This story had a lot going on. I kept waiting. It had a lot going on, but then at the same time, I kept waiting for it to kind of get twisty-turny, and it didn't really happen. There was lots of different things happening, but it wasn't ever like shocking or confusing or left you off balance like the previous book that I mentioned. It didn't really do that. It was just kind of a lot happening, kind of leading you up to like what's going on, but it wasn't ever like shocking or like twisty in any way. I just thought this was just okay. There were there's an element to the end part of the story that I don't know if I want to mention. Like, it's not technically a spoiler, but I guess it could kind of be considered like minor spoilery, so I'm not going to mention it. But that type of element added into this story really didn't work for me, basically. Okay, so it was still enjoyable. I would recommend checking this out if the premise sounds interesting to you, but it wasn't one of my favorites. I ended up giving it 3 stars. So those are the books that I read, the 3 that finish off my 2019 reading year. And then the first book that I picked up for 2020 that I ended up completing was the first book in this bind-up, and the first book in the Trill trilogy, which is called Switched, and it's by Amanda Hocking. So this is basically a YA paranormal trilogy. We follow a main character named Wendy, who has never really fit in with her family. Her father died when she was 5, and then when she was 6, her mother never was close with her, and then her mother basically tried to murder her when she was 6. Said that she wasn't her daughter and tried to murder her, and ended up in a psychiatric facility. And so Wendy and her older brother have been raised by an aunt. Wendy comes to find out, this is in the synopsis, this isn't a spoiler, comes to find out that she's basically a troll princess, and that she's like a changeling. So the trolls replaced the baby with Wendy, and they raised the baby, the human baby, and she was raised by the humans. And then now that she's kind of coming of age, they have come to reclaim her and bring her back to the troll kind of kingdom. I didn't really like this, which was fun for my first read of 2020. Which is not really a big deal. I'm not really superstitious about that type of thing, but I didn't really like this. I didn't think the writing was that great, if I'm being honest. It felt very of its time. It was also incredibly frustrating to read because, like, when Wendy gets to like this troll kind of kingdom or whatever, she doesn't understand anything, which is fair because she hasn't been told anything, but people get angry at her constantly for like doing the wrong thing and not knowing anything about this world, but no one tells her anything about this world. So that was really annoying. But then equally, Wendy gets annoyed that people are angry at her about not knowing anything, and gets annoyed that she doesn't know anything and that people aren't explaining things to her. But then when people are trying to explain things to her, she's like not really listening. And like literally there's lines in the book like, oh, I just couldn't be bothered to listen, like stuff like that. And I'm like, what? Like, it's just made no sense. And then the ending of this first book when we get to the end, it just felt like it made no, like, the decision and the whole thing was just like, okay, well, that was made the whole part of the book feel completely pointless. Like, it just made no sense. And I was like, that's just really dumb. There's also like a very like cheesy type of romance, like, which you would kind of expect. Didn't love this. I gave it 2.5 stars. Because I own the whole trilogy, I've never DNF'd a trilogy that I do own the whole thing of, so I probably will push through with this at least through the second book, and then we'll see whether I end up finishing the whole thing, depending on how bad the second book is, because I didn't love this first book. Like I said, did I say? I gave it 2.5 stars. So there was that. And then the final book that I read over this past week, my foot, typically, as always in these videos, is falling asleep. The final book that I read over this past week was A Million Worlds with You by Claudia Gray. This is the third and final book in the Firebird trilogy, which is a YA sci-fi trilogy that follows our main character of Marguerite, whose father and mother have like invented this technology that makes people able to travel between parallel universes or alternate universes. And at the start of the first, like in the first book, at the start of it, Marguerite's father has been murdered and the technology has kind of been stolen, and she basically goes on a journey through alternate universes trying to track down this person who has stolen the technology to try and get it back. And she's like on a like chase kind of through lots of different dimensions. So that's kind of what the first book is about. I obviously can't say what this third book is about without giving you major spoilers. I enjoyed this. It definitely, to me, wasn't as strong as the first two books, in my opinion. There's a lot of alternate universes in this, which I love. That's basically my favorite thing about this trilogy, is just getting to see the alternate universes. It's really fun. Some of the alternate universes are like very similar to the main kind of world with just minor differences. Some are completely different. There's like an underwater like one type of thing, all of that. So like there's a lot of like fun alternate universes, which I really enjoyed seeing. But this did to me get a little bit repetitive. I can't really say in what way, obviously, like I said, because I can't really say what this is about, so I can't really say in what way, but it just to me got a bit repetitive. It was just kind of like we were doing the same thing, getting to that point and then starting again, and then getting to that point and then starting again, and so it got a little bit repetitive to me. But overall, I did enjoy this. I would definitely recommend this trilogy overall. I gave this final book 3.5 stars. That's it. Those are the books that I read. In terms of what I'm currently reading, so I did start an audiobook this week. I mentioned that in my previous video, that I've started the audiobook for The Things We Keep by Sally Hepworth. This is a like literary fiction, I guess, about a woman who has early, I keep wanting to say onset, but onset is not the correct word in like the way that the disease is described. It's a form of dementia that hits you at an early age. She first started seeing symptoms, I believe, when she was 28, so very young. She is now in her like mid or late 30s or something like that, and is now in an assisted living facility. And she basically forms a romance with another resident at the assisted living facility who also has another form of like early age dementia. And then the synopsis alludes to there being some kind of tragic event that makes them be torn apart in some way. I'm not sure exactly kind of where we're headed. I'm about 28% of the way through. I am enjoying it so far. It's kind of interesting. So I'm interested to see kind of where we end up with that. So I am listening to that. I started it earlier in the week because I was out on a day of shopping. So I just listened to it like kind of while I was walking around the shops. I haven't listened to any of it since then, and I probably won't start it back up again until I go back to work on Monday, but then I will finish it off on Monday or Tuesday or whenever I finish it once I go back to work. So that's the audiobook I'm kind of listening to. And then I have started the second book in the Trill trilogy, which is called Torn. I've literally just started it. I've read 2 chapters. So like I said, I am going to push through and read the second book. These are also really short. Like, it's obviously quite chunky because it's got all 3 books in it, but the first book was like 290 pages, and I believe the second one is a similar length, so it's not like it's really difficult to read. And that's what I'm currently reading. So that's it, I guess. I feel like I got through this recent reads video a lot quicker than I usually do, but those are my recent reads, the reads that I read to finish off 2019 and to start off 2020. I would love to chat with you guys in the comments down below if you've read any of these books, if you've got any thoughts on them, or I would love to chat about what you guys were reading to finish up 2019 or to start off 2020. Are you guys superstitious about your first read? Like, you really carefully like pick out what you're going to read for that first read because you want to start off the year like on a really strong note? Like I said, I'm not really like that, but I totally understand like there being a lot of pressure on that first read sometimes. I think I try to get around the pressure. I was actually talking about this with Mel recently, that I always try to pick up my first read of the year. Like, so I generally see in midnight on New Year's, or I try to. This year I fell asleep. But then before I go to bed, like after midnight or whatever, I always try to pick up whatever my next read is going to be, just whatever my book normally naturally would be, and just read at least a chapter before I go to bed to just like start off the new year with reading. So yeah, I would love to chat with you guys in the comments down below. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more from my channel. That is all I have for this video today. Bye guys.